Hello guys, so I wanted to talk a little bit about UFC 330, and I don't want to make this too long because I would make a little bit of a prediction video also, but I've heard quite a few people talk about this card now already because it's the next numbered event, and there's of course a very important fight on the card with Islam Makhachev against Ian Gary. But it seems as though pretty unanimously people don't like this card and accuse it of being weak when it comes to the other fights on the card, right? So it's not a very good pay-per-view or numbered event is the accusation against it, and I can understand why you would think this on the surface. But actually, I would disagree with this take, apart from a few exceptions. I actually like a lot of the fights on this card. I'm very interested in a lot of these fights. I understand, of course, that there's not that much name value on this card, right? Most of these other people are not stars or particularly well-known fighters. I guess you would probably have to say that Mackenzie Dern is the biggest. Mackenzie Dern might actually even be a bigger name than Ian Gary. I think that's heavily debatable, but I think a lot of casual fans know who Mackenzie Dern is because of the stuff that's been said about her. I think it went pretty viral when Joey Diaz talked about her on the Joe Rogan Experience, and then there's been a lot of memes around her with her accent and this kind of stuff. Just given the fact that she's an attractive woman, that makes and that she's been around the top of the division for a long time. I think she might have gathered more attention over the years than Ian Gary has. Although, I mean, there's a lot of content surrounding Ian Gary now too. Mostly stuff hating on him. So it's hard to judge, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mackenzie Dern is known by more casual MMA fans than Ian Gary. And so, given that that might be the case, that except from Islam Makhachev, the next biggest star on the card is Mackenzie Dern or Ian Gary. Let's say it's Ian Gary, and then there's a big drop off where I would say that probably the biggest name after that has to be Edson Barboza, I would assume, right? Edson Barboza, who is really not a noteworthy fighter in the division anymore, right? Because he's ranked number 66, and he's losing quite a lot of his fights against low-level, not never really low-level opposition, but against fighters who are not in the top 15. He's aging out of the sport, right? But he is probably known for some of his highlights, which is kind of really what you want to be known for as a fighter. His spinning wheel kick against, I think it's Terry Adam, is one of the most famous finishes in combat sports history, probably, right? It's not even enough to say UFC history. I think that wheel kick has been seen by many, 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 many people, and those people might actually recognize Edson Barboza if they see him, maybe not from the name, but and I always love Edson Barboza fighting. I love everything about when Edson Barboza fights, except of course that he gets brutally beaten up often now. I'm a big Barboza fan, is what I'm trying to say. I really still want to make a highlight video with Edson Barboza's moments, because I believe that Edson Barboza has the best highlight reel in the entire sport, maybe in combat sports history. If somebody was to actually cut together all of the highlights, right? You can't actually find a good highlight video of Edson Barboza on YouTube anymore. There are some, and they're good, but he deserves so much better. Even in the fights that he loses, he has incredibly dynamic, cool as fuck moments often. Against Kevin Lee, for example. And it's just it's a stylistic thing, that makes this possible for him, because he's very, very fast. He's fast and powerful and flexible. And so even in a fight where he gets tired and beaten up and loses, he has some really dynamic, cool moments early on, oftentimes. And so I always like watching him fight, even if he loses, just to look for those moments that you could cut into a highlight reel, because I'm eventually going to do that one day, just to honor Edson Barboza. I think that's fair. I really do think that he has the best highlight reel ever. I don't even know who would come close second. It's just the fact that he's had so many of like wheel kick, spinning back kick, super fast, smooth combinations. His kicks are generally so fast and stuff, and so I'm really looking forward. And he's fighting a pretty good opponent this time, who's also a heavy favorite I'm seeing, Esteban Ribovic. This is going to be a great fight. Right, and probably Barboza's going to lose this fight, but maybe he will have a few cool moments. Man, he's 40 now. Okay, so yeah, so this is a great fight. Like, this is, in my opinion, this is also the co-main event. You should make this the co-main event. Put some respect on the veterans, put some respect on the legends of the sport, the actual legends. Who gives a fuck about the strawweight belt? Honestly, I certainly don't, and I don't think that 90% of the people tuning into this are interested to see what happens with Jillian Robertson and Mackenzie Dern. I don't even think that if the ladies are reasonable people, they would disagree with this. It's just really not the case that people care about WMMA. They just don't. It's a small minority of people who tune in, and most of them are probably people who know Mackenzie Dern or Jillian Robertson personally. Other than that, who actually, other than like some huge sims or like feminists, but how many of them are going to tune into this? You always hear the complaints of feminists about equal pay in sports and this kind of stuff, but then you ask them, but do you watch female soccer? And the answer is always no. Well, then how do you expect them to get paid the same as the men if nobody's watching, including yourself? Right? Like, the men are watching the men play, and this is why the men get paid so much. But if you want the women to get paid an equal amount or even close to that, maybe you could start by actually watching their games. But of course nobody ever does that. It's just about, being a fucking, I don't want to use the C word now, because I think that I'm so unclear on the rules with YouTube. I think it probably only affects the monetization, so I could probably say the word cunt. There you go, I did. Okay, so then let's continue looking through the card. Mansour Abdul Malik. I'm very interested in his fight with Dustin Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus, a little bit of a bit of a nationalistic interest here, because he's a American German guy who speaks German, and I think he even trains in Germany. And so there's always a little bit of interest in that. Although, to be completely honest, I don't really think that Dustin Stoltzfus is very good, I have to admit. And you can see also he is a heavy underdog. Probably a bit too heavy for my taste. Although you have to say that you cannot take too much, I mean, not an enormous amount of like, you can't really judge him too harshly for his loss against Yusri Belgari. Abdul Malik, this is, right? Because he got beaten up pretty badly in this last fight, but it was Yusri Belgari, who is a pretty accomplished kickboxer from Glory. He's had fights with Alex Pereira. I think he fought Alex Pereira twice. At least twice. And he's obviously pretty good. We've all I think have learned that in that fight. Okay, but this is super interesting. We can see how will he bounce back. Will he perform really well now? Is he gonna be a little bit gun shy? Is there gonna be grappling in this fight? What is the game plan of Dustin Stoltzfus gonna be? Is he gonna respect Abdul Malik on the feet and go to the grappling? Is he going to try to strike with him? Has he maybe identified some weaknesses, or does he believe that Abdul Malik is breakable and this kind of stuff? We will see, but it's interesting. It's super interesting as a fight. Then we have Joel Alvarez against Chidi Njukwani, and this is also a great fight in my opinion. I can't really say too much about it stylistically, because I have not really paid that close attention to either man, but I do kind of know what position they're in the company, and they're both respectable fighters. I would say, particularly Joel Alvarez is. He did get choked out here by Amosov, but he's had pretty impressive and pretty consistently impressive performances in the past against people who are respectable. His victory against Thiago Moises, his TKO victory, his submission victory over Mark Diakese, his knockout over Dorkar Klose, and his decision victory against Luque. These are not maybe the most world-class victories you could get, right? But these are good. And also, knocking out Elvis Brenner. This is not nothing, okay? And so losing by submission here in the second round in this last fight, that's not too damning. And then of course also Aman Sarukian defeated him, but is who is really gonna judge him too much for that? You can't really do that. Sarukian has an extremely high degree of he has a lot of respect in MMA right now. If even the MMA guru could not outgrapple Aman Sarukian, and I think that says everything you need to know. Alright, so then we have Jalen Turner return. Super interested to see Jalen Turner return. I don't particularly like Jalen Turner, although I don't know anything about him. I think he has like snakes or something, which is pretty cool actually. I don't know why I don't like him so much, but I think it's because he defeated a few of the fighters that I like. That's probably the reason. Alright, he beat up Edson Barboza. That's reason enough for me to hate him, Man, he lost quite a bit. That's so interesting. I did not expect his record to be so full of defeats. Um, yeah, so he beat Uros Medic, Jamie Mulaki, Josh Coolibau, Brad Riddell. I mean, I kind of like all of these guys, not too much. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly why I don't like Jalen Turner too much. Maybe it's unfair of me. But you know, I mean that's just how things go. Sometimes you just don't. There's just some impression that doesn't really. That's just how people are, you know. Sometimes you just don't like a person and you don't even know exactly why. And oftentimes, you know, things are not liking a person is a consequence of projecting stuff onto them, or like hearing some kind of rumor and then forgetting even about it, you know. Just some kind of like, but then often it's just also an appearance based thing. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, I mean, the implication here is not so good for me, that I don't like this black guy, but there are some black guys that I like, so I don't think it's purely based on that. I don't know, whatever. I always want him to fight Drew Dober or Quillen Sarkild, because they're both lightweight, so and they have this you know, they have this reputation for being extra motivated when fighting somebody of a different ethnicity, and Jalen Turner is you know, I mean, he's the number 15. He's like right in the range where a fight with Drew Dober or Quillen Sarkild would make sense. And so right, like it would be a super cool fight. A lot of people would be interested in that. Much more so than interested in a fight with this guy, a Cowie Fernandez. I've never seen this this name before. Cowie. It seems more like a. If you say it like that, it seems like a Maori or like a Polynesian name. But or like Hawaiian, right? Which is Polynesia, I think. But so he has finished a guy with a calf kick. Oh, it was Harry Hardwick. Okay, I see. And this is, you know, you can't take too much away from that, but it's something. He's probably gonna kick Jalen Turner's leg also a bunch, because Jalen Turner has very thin legs. Alright, and then on the rest of the card we have Neil Magny against Ramiz Brahimaj. I don't really know who either of these guys are here. Jonte Johnson and Eric McConico. I don't know these guys, so I have nothing to say about that. But Neil Magny and Ramiz Brahimaj, this is a very interesting fight. I mean, Neil Magny not too exciting most of the time, but Ramiz Brahimaj is pretty consistently exciting, I would say. So why not have this as a fight? You know, I mean, there's not too much I can criticize about that as a matchup. I'm also interested to see Charles Johnson again. And what else do we have? Vicente Luque against Trajan Gore. I think this is a pretty interesting fight. And then also we have Jeremiah Wells against Miktabek Orolbai. And Orolbai, I think that his last fight was against Hermansen. No, of course he did out-grapple Chris Curtis after that. And Chris Curtis had this whole meltdown about it again. I think that's what happened. Because it wasn't an exciting performance, but you know, I mean, he just brutally slapped Jack Hermansen in the fight right before that. I have a little bit more, you know, I can forgive this kind of fight style a little bit more when you're just coming off a brutal knockout, one of the most brutal knockouts of that year. I mean, it's always just like, are you always looking to make this fight boring? And maybe he would have had an incredibly boring fight with Jack Hermanson. Maybe it was just luck. But the fact is that it wasn't boring. It was a brutal KO in the first round. And then out grappling Chris Curtis for 3 rounds in his next fight. I can forgive that, as long as he doesn't have another one of those super, super boring performances now. And then also the fight before Hermanson, he also got a first round finish. So, it's like this guy is coming off 2 first round stoppages in a row. And then he has a bit of a boring fight against Chris Curtis where he just holds him against the cage. But then it's also, that's already something to consider. But then it's also just a 3 round fight, So it's not a 5 round main event, right? A main event. I think that you should judge that a little bit more harshly than this, especially knowing how sensitive Chris Curtis is. I would probably enjoy that too, just to hold him against the fence and have him internally crumble from frustration and anger. That would be kind of fun. I would probably enjoy soul crushing Chris Curtis with that too. So I can kind of forgive that in this case. But I will turn on Orobai, don't you worry, if this becomes a pattern. I think I'm fairly consistent with this stuff. It's twofold. It's always twofold with me when it comes to this style of fighting, because holding somebody down and not doing much is something that I can respect if it's I can respect it from the perspective that you're playing it safe, you've chosen a career that is super, super dangerous, that will reduce the quality of your life after retirement because of the brain damage, and where winning versus not winning makes a huge financial difference and reputational difference for you. And so having a boring fight where you're playing it safe, I respect it, because you want to minimize the risk. You don't want to do something like Yuri where you already have, Yuri against Carlos Ulberg, where you actually almost like voluntarily taking more risk than you have to, just because you feel like you want to have a real fight, show a real fight, have an entertaining fight, but then you get knocked out, right? And that's always a bit of a risk. You always have that risk. If you give Chris Curtis a chance, if you give Dricus du Plessis a chance, if you give what was it? Islam Makhachev, JDM, right? If you give JDM a chance, they could knock you out, right? And if you can out-grapple them and hold them down and bore everybody to death with that, you can do that. And I have to respect that if you really just say, man, look, I'm just trying to stay in the position that I'm in as the champion and win and get the money and take no damage. I don't want to risk any damage. I'm just gonna play it safe. It's his problem if he cannot stop me. Now, from the perspective of a mixed martial arts fan who enjoys the violence and the bloodshed, I hate that. I fucking hate that, and I've said that a bunch, I think. Because I'm looking to be entertained. this is why people like Justin Gaethje, and it used to be Tony Ferguson. I used to love T.J. Dillashaw and Max Holloway too. I always used to love these guys because they would always have entertaining fights, and especially Gaethje, and Tony Ferguson too. It stopped when he lost his aura. Then he had a few boring fights too. But anyway, so like when judging this as a human, as a man, I totally understand why you would fight this way, and I have to respect it. As a fan of mixed martial arts, as a guy who's sitting at home taking his free time to watch this, looking to see something super cool and inspiring, I absolutely hate that. And I think both of those perspectives can exist in one person too. I think that I can have both of that present. I obviously do have both of that present. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that sometimes my one of those perspectives takes over a little bit. I made a video. I did put it on private, where I was kind of hating on Islam Makhachev after his performance against JDM. And I don't think I said anything horrible, but I was mad, and I thought it fucking sucked. And I complained about that, and that, that's coming from the fan that was super, super disappointed. But then, again, from the different perspective, from the perspective as a man, I have to respect that kind of fighting style. And so it's always like to be judged on a case-by-case basis, I think. And with Orobay against Chris Curtis, I really have no, or at least not much problem with that. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I think that 330 is pretty interesting actually overall. I think there's a lot of good fights on this card. There's also only one female fight on it, right? Am I correct? Yeah, okay, so there was another female fight that was cancelled. Yeah, I think this is pretty cool. I don't have a problem with it at all. Of course, I understand also, the name value stuff. But the thing is that just because you have two recognizable names, that doesn't make the fight a good fight, right? There's famously between really, really well-known fighters, legendarily boring fights. You have Derek Lewis against Francis Ngannou. You have Israel Adesanya against Yoel Romero. You have Stephen Thompson against Darren Till. If those matchups, those types of matchups were on this card, a lot of people would be happy. There wouldn't be as many complaints. But styles make fights. That's always been the case. That's one of the most important phrases in MMA, because it dictates not only what the result of the fight's going to be, but also what kind of fight you're going to get. And if you match up Darren Till with Stephen Thompson, you're probably going to get a staring match. Right? Nobody expected it with Derek Lewis and Ngannou. But, they were both evidently scared of each other. And then Adesanya, I think that there was more, at least I was already not too thrilled with some of his performances in the past. But so just because there's recognizable names on a card doesn't make it a good card. And just because there's no name people, nobody's on the card, doesn't make it a bad card. And I think we've just had this proven with the UFC Belgrade card, where you had more finishes than you've ever had before on any UFC card, and yet nobody of note was on that card. So yeah. So that's my opinion about UFC 330.